Well, welcome in, LSU fans, to another edition of the Go 24/7 podcast. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Glen West. Before we get started, if you're watching over on the YouTube channel, make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe so you know when we post our latest content. And if you're listening over on those platforms, audio, whether it's Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you give us a follow and a review there as well. Well, the LSU baseball team continue to play late into the night, Glenn, over the weekend as they take down the Arkansas Razorbacks in a top 10 matchup. And noteworthy, the number one team in the country when the new rankings, fresh rankings come out here on Monday. But more importantly, the Tigers take 2 of 3 from Arkansas, a massive series, senior weekend kind of at Alex Box, Glenn. I was not in town, was out in Georgia for my sister's graduation. By the way, I do need to ask you this. I don't know if you saw I tweeted this late Thursday. What's your go-to gas station snack? You get
Ooh,
one food, one drink. To kick it off for
ooh,
the
put
podcast.
me on the spot here.
I did. I just thought about I forgot I tweeted that during the game. So
So
what were your thoughts?
for Valentine's Day and then for Easter, my mom has been getting me these peanut M&Ms, and
Ooh.
those are addictive for one thing.
Mhm.
Like it's hard to put those down when you start. So I would
Yeah.
say peanut M&Ms would be a good kind of car snack for me, and then a drink, just a soda, Diet Coke, Coke
Okay.
Zero, Dr. Pepper, something like that. Yeah,
Gotcha.
pretty
Mm,
traditional, but
I gotcha.
yeah, that's a good one. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah. Well, I posed that on social media. A lot of LSU fans responded with, I'm having some crackling. I might even throw some boudin. I was like, I need to go to the gas stations you guys are going to. I'm just talking about your typical like
Yeah,
run into the convenience store type of thing. I'm not talking
I
about
wouldn't I
mom and
wouldn't
pop.
trust a gas station boudin, that's for damn sure. I'm just sticking to the originals, sticking to the classics.
Well, maybe if you're an LSU fan, you'll find yourself in that spot over the next week or two if you're traveling to Columbia, South Carolina for the final weekend, or maybe up to Hoover for the SEC tournament. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But Glenn, just kind of, I guess, 30,000 foot view. Your big takeaways. I know you highlighted it in your 3 up, 3 down piece this morning. Just where you kind of stand with this series, what it meant to you, and we'll talk about did it do enough for a top 8 seed. But just maybe your big takeaways from this weekend at Alex Box.
Yeah, they handled their business. They needed to come in and defend their home field here, and take 2 out of 3 at the very minimum. You could have gotten greedy on Sunday and won that Sunday game, and they were in position to do so. The
Mhm.
bats fell a little cold, and bullpen didn't quite get you through the ninth inning the way that they probably needed you to. But I thought for the majority of this series, LSU was in control, and I think that against a top 5 team in Arkansas that was coming off a sweep of Texas. Very encouraging that they were able to do that and dominate in the way that they did on Saturday, win in extra innings the way that they did on Friday. I mean, Jay Johnson called Friday's game and atmosphere an Omaha type game. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
and that certainly lived up to the billing, the way that it ended there, and the big time clutch performances that they needed down the stretch. Saturday was a really just you put your pedal to the metal kind of game for LSU, and they showed you like how difficult a team they can be if a team's going to have to come in here for a regional or a super regional
Mhm.
and have to take 2 out of 3 from LSU. Like that's going to be really, really difficult. And the offense was really, really good in that game. Anthony Ianson continues to get better by the week, it appears. And I think you could probably flip a coin, honestly, between him and Kate Anderson on who's been better in SEC play. And
Yeah.
you can make an argument for either guy, and I don't think you'd be wrong. So that's a really good position if you're LSU to be in when you look ahead to the postseason. Having those 2 guys start 2 different games for you in any kind of scenario. So I thought that was a really major takeaway, that those 2 guys continue to live up to the billing here late in the season. The offense, I thought, when you look at kind of what they did with Jake Brown and Ethan Fry, particularly on those last couple of days there, really like what they've done, contributed to the plate, particularly Fry. I mean,
Mhm.
Fry had, a career kind of game against Arkansas on Friday night where he got the big, kind of the big swing, the big hit that kind of propelled LSU to that win that got Jared Jones home, and then he comes right back on Saturday. I think he goes 2 for 4 with 4 RBIs in that game as well. Blasted a
Mhm.
home run. So just really consistent play at the plate from Fry. and gives LSU another power hitter that they, I think, probably need at that point in the lineup when you're talking about backing up Jared Jones or, I think he's a little bit flexible in where they can use him in the lineup, but really in that 4 spot is where they've, I think, pegged Fry for the most part in his starts. And then Jake Brown, I thought, was a really positive sign for LSU. They've been going back and forth between him and Josh Pearson, and I do think
Yeah.
Pearson's still going to have his opportunities. But the way that Jake Brown performed this weekend, I think it's hard to imagine him being taken out of the starting lineup anytime soon. And we've said that a couple different times throughout the season, and
Yeah.
I think LSU has gone that route with him before, and there have been some stretches where he hasn't really responded after getting those kind of consistent starts. I think they just need to really lean into it now and just, especially with postseason play coming, just find that 9, find that 10. That 10th guy can be Josh Pearson. It can be Kate Arambidi at catcher, backing up Luis Hernandez, who I thought both Hernandez and Arambidi had really good days behind the plate and on the and at the plate on offense as well. So some really good positives, I think, overall from the offense. And then Sunday game didn't go your way. Casey Evans got off to a rocky start, especially in that 3rd inning where Arkansas was hitting him a little bit and gave up the 4 runs. And typically, when LSU has given up 4 runs in an inning this year, they have not won that game. So, not a huge shocker there that they weren't able to come back and win. But I thought the lone bright spot was probably Chase Shores and what he was able to do, going 3 1/3. Did a couple different things with his pitch delivery, which I thought was interesting. They had him from the stretch, even with nobody on and no outs. He was, I think, it's just a way to shorten up his delivery, shorten up his pitching. And another colleague of ours pointed this out. He had his right foot a little bit angled and kind of out in front of his body a little bit more, I think maybe to protect, his arm a little bit in terms of, not giving the hitter the pitch, too early. So I think there's a couple things that they've been working with him on that seems to really be working, at least for this one outing. You want to see it continue. And but those are just a couple of my bigger takeaways from the weekend. And just you're going to need all these guys to respond and continue to produce in big time postseason games, and certainly on the mound with Shores. I think him pitching well down the stretch and into postseason play really changes the outlook of this pitching staff in the postseason, and certainly this team, if they're able to get some consistency out of him in whatever role they ask him to be in.
Wanted to talk a little bit more about Case and Evans because it's kind of back-to-back starts, Glenn, that we've seen him. And look, kid's a true freshman, right? Like starting on a Sunday, like it's still very difficult, even though he was so dynamic and elite as a late inning reliever, as your closer. I don't know if, well, first I want to say this. You hinted this. I think LSU has a real claim to having 2 aces, right? And Cade Anderson, Anthony Ianson. That is rare territory in college baseball that LSU can boast about. That Friday and Saturday, you know what you're going to get out of your starting pitcher. On Sundays, Glenn, they don't need Case and Evans to join that company. I really think that they just need Evans to be able to navigate, keep the game manageable, where it is. If Chase Shores continues to develop, we know he can go multiple innings potentially there. And then you could turn it over to some of these guys that in the bullpen, where I think you're starting to see some more kind of opportunities. Like, look, Maverick Rizzi wasn't great this weekend, but he did, he has shown, I guess, a track record over the past 3 or 4 weeks that they are going to count on him, that he's going to be an arm. A guy that we haven't talked a ton about, they just kind of keep going to in certain spots, DJ Primo. Like, he hasn't been elite, but he has eaten some innings for you. And I think I wanted to ask you this. The expectation of Case and Evans was, oh my gosh, like, can he do this? And then obviously against, Tennessee, he has the rough first inning and then goes out there and dominates. Do you share the sentiment of they just need him to be able to manage and navigate through the lineup maybe 2 times and then turn it over to a bullpen that you hope can obviously help and string together to the back end?
Yeah, I can tell you this. There's not a lot of programs around the country that have a third starter that's as talented as Casey Evans. And
Yeah.
he's got all the tools, all the ability, all the talent. We've seen that and when he's been out of the bullpen for LSU this year. And so I do think there's some truth in that. And really, this was the first weekend where it kind of got away from him in an inning. Like, he certainly did not look his sharpest on the road at A&M last weekend. But he was only he only went about 3 1/3, but he was able to limit the damage to just 1 run. Like that's what they need out of him. Even if he's not going to be
Mhm.
at his best, uh, on some occasions, as long as the sign of a really good pitcher to me is a guy that even when he's not at his best, he's still limiting damage and not allowing the big crooked number and all those things that kind of go into winning and losing a game on the mound. And he was really good at that for the first couple weeks. And honestly, the
Mhm.
start against Tennessee was really good. I mean, like he went 6 innings in that game against one of the hottest teams at the time in the country, and was able to, I think, limit them to 1 or 2 runs as well. And so that's the one thing that Jay Johnson did say that I think kind of came to his Evans' defense a little bit, is that he's gone through a 3-week gauntlet here that as a starter that's really really tough in terms of
Yeah.
Tennessee. A&M was a team that before they got swept by Missouri this last weekend was among the hotter teams in the country. They had just beaten LSU at home, and and then obviously with Arkansas, who came into this thing as one of the top teams in the country in terms of offense and defense, one of the more well-rounded teams in the country, and certainly in the SEC. So it's, you're going to certainly have to ask him to step up and be better in the future, because when you get into postseason play in particular, whether it's a super regional, whether it's an Omaha, or maybe even a regional, there's going to be some good teams in there that you're going to have to play, and certainly have to avoid those 4 or 5 run type of innings to
Mhm.
be successful in those goals. So it was a rocky one for him for sure, I mean, he also had, I think, 2 innings there in the first couple where he was,
Yeah.
not as sharpest, but he was able to pitch around some of the trouble, and that's where I think he's going to have to really lie if LSU is going to ask him to be a starter going forward. And I don't know that they've pigeonholed themselves into that yet either. Like to your point, I think they can be a little bit more versatile with his role. And kind of see kind of what the weekend presents them going into those final games, or if they need him earlier in series or in a regional or a super regional, they can still go that route as well, and
Mhm.
rely on some of these other guys to help get you through the end of a big time weekend.
I was looking around, and it kind of takes us to this next part of the conversation. LSU, you mentioned, took care of business against Arkansas. And Glenn, when I was getting ready for the show, I was, kind of looking at, and you mentioned this in the opening. Did they do enough to secure a top 8 seed? Now, I will read you this. USA Today had a projection, has them on the 5 lines, the 5 seed right behind Georgia, Florida State at the 3 seed, Arkansas at the 2 seed, Texas at the 1 seed. That would be the Baton Rouge Regional, would be LSU, Southern Miss. I'm going to say UTRGV, that is Texas Rio Grande Valley for you absolute college athletics mid-major sickos out there. And then Missouri State. The Field of 64 came out with one that I'll have a vested interest in, probably a little bit more than others. LSU, Georgia Tech, Southeastern Louisiana, and Columbia. Those 2 projections, and we're going to see
Are
more
they a
as
5 seed in
get
that one
closer.
too?
I
Are they
apologize. They're the 6th seed in that one, so
okay?
um, they're behind Georgia, and Vanderbilt is the 4 seed, which is an interesting one. Florida State 3 seed, and then Auburn is the 2 seed, which they've caught in fire, and then Texas in the 1 seed. So around that 5 to 6 seed is where you're seeing some projections. More are going to come out after this podcast is published, obviously. Do you feel like they did enough? Because the logjam of the SEC didn't really change a ton after this weekend, in my opinion. But this was a statement series win, and this did make a statement for you to maybe catapult yourself firmly into that conversation. Where do you kind of sit? Does their work still need to be done for this team to wrap up a top 8 seed?
I don't think so. Like, I think it would be something pretty extreme for LSU to fall out of that top 8 conversation. I think you're talking about getting swept at South Carolina, and then a couple other things maybe happening for you to really fall out of that picture. But I think LSU is pretty firmly in this top 8 here, especially if you go on the road and you get 2 more wins or 3 more wins against South Carolina. You're certainly in a great position there to be the top 8 seed. And I was doing some looking around too. I think LSU going into last or kind of leaving the weekend now, they have 13 quadrant 1 wins, and I think they have another 6 quadrant 2 wins leaving the weekend, which puts them up to 19 in terms of quad 1 and quad 2, which is in terms of like just strength of schedule and the quality wins that you have in the country, which was among the top 4 or 5 in the country. I was kind of scrolling through that. I don't think any other team has more than 21 or 22. And LSU's 19 is right there, like right in the middle of the top 4 or 5 in the country. And RPI, I think, is still strong. I think they're right at 7. I think that they've done enough to this point. And I asked Jay Johnson that after the game on Sunday, if he would have taken this position. He said he went back home after the A&M loss and was up late at night. May or may not have been drinking orange juice. If fans follow Jay Johnson or follow his press conferences, that's one thing that he says sometimes when he's up late at night, thinking about a series or about the future. He is typically drinking an orange juice with that. But he said that if he had told himself at the beginning of the season that LSU was in that position, would he have taken it? And he said he would have. And they only strengthened that this weekend against Arkansas. So I do think that they're pretty firmly in the mix here to be a top 8 national seed, regardless of what happens at Carolina, barring some massive unforeseen thing. And I think LSU in that scenario would also have to have some help from other guys to really fall out of that. So they're well positioned here. I don't think that it's a scenario that fans have to be really, really worried about. And look, they came out with all the top 25s this week, and you mentioned it's pretty consensus that LSU was number 1 in the country. I know that those don't mean much in terms of like the committee and everything and what they ultimately decide, but those are national baseball writers that do this for a living and that cover all the teams across the country and
have watched all those teams.
And they're not that out of tune. Like there's just no way that they're that, if they go from 1 and then if the LSU's at 1 and then it comes out and the committee has them at 9 or 10, that's a pretty large discrepancy there that I don't think all those guys are off on. So I think it's a roundabout way of saying, yes, LSU's in a good spot. And if they take care of business against South Carolina, there's absolutely no question about it. And then you just go to the SEC tournament and we'll get into kind of how you kind of shape things up from there. But I think that they're really positioned well to be able to host at least a regional and a super regional in Alex Box. And certainly when they've been at home this year, they've been a much different team, a much better team than when they've had to go on the road.
I thought it was worth mentioning in that, and you talked about the discrepancy. I was looking back at, I guess, the last 2 years, and the number 1 through 3 ranked teams, just for fodder, just for you to look at, have all been a top 8 national seed. So the final standings, if you were 1 through 3, you were a top 8 national seed. So a little wiggle room there for LSU, but I do understand that the logjam in the SEC creates a lot of, I guess you would say, like, interesting conversations like that. I think you could stay up late debating, well, this team beat this team here, that team beat that team here, all of those things being said. But I did want to pull this up from our good friends over Michael Boutel, who does a good job with College Baseball Central and the job that they do, Glenn. I wanted to bring this up because I thought this was pretty pertaining to what we're talking about. For our people watching, you can look alongside of us and see this. So this is the projected, Glenn, as of today, the SEC baseball tournament bracket. You can see the LSU cap down there, which obviously for fans who don't know, this is a completely single elimination bracket now. LSU could not play until Friday, which is a long way to wait, I guess, to play a game, with the first game happening, what we assume, like Tuesday morning at 11 a.m., and then they're going to play.
You won't hear any complaints from Jay Johnson on that, by the way.
No, sir. No, sir. Not one. 16 teams, 6 days. You do get a double bye. Right now, those top 4 seeds in the SEC tournament, Texas, Arkansas, the 2 seed, LSU, the 3 seed, Vanderbilt, the 4 seed there. Wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this because this is what you're looking at, okay? If let's just say the season ended today, Florida and Texas A&M, which I think are some sneaky 11 and 14 seeds in the conference, which is crazy to think about it there. Then you have Auburn. I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here. I am trying to paint the opposite picture, Glenn. There's a chance with those 3 teams, if it were to hold like this, you could be a one-and-done team. What do you feel like this team needs to do in Hoover? Because the last 2 seasons, it's been kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Like, you would have loved to do some more damage 2 years ago, but hey, you ended up winning it all. It didn't matter. last year they had to do some damage and then some to be able to even have a chance to play meaningful postseason baseball. Your thoughts on maybe this bracket? We obviously know we have one more series weekend series to look at, but just kind of how this would shape up. I don't know. That's a tough draw for LSU in that 3 seed, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then last year they ended up getting all the way to the final in the SEC tournament, and that
Yeah,
put all that to bed very quickly. But look, I think if you're able to handle your business this weekend against South Carolina, it doesn't matter what happens. Like
yeah,
you could lose that game, and it's really no harm, no foul, in my opinion, on where LSU ultimately is in terms of a top 8 national seed. I will say, if Auburn is a team that you have a chance to play at some point in this tournament, you certainly wouldn't hurt to beat those guys after they
yeah,
swept you, a month or so ago at their place. So I think we have to wait till this Carolina series plays out. There could be a scenario here, I guess, where LSU's maybe on that 8-9 bubble or something, and they have to win a game or two in Hoover to really kind of strengthen their resume from a quality quad one strength of schedule perspective. But I
mhm,
do think that they're if they handle their business in Columbia, then they'll be just fine. And I think probably the bigger question that I would have is, if they do that, how much of it is going to be toying with, okay, we know we have the regional coming up the week after the SEC tournament. How much of that pitching is going to be like,
exactly.
do we throw Cade Anderson, like 65, 70 pitches and then hand it over to the bullpen and see if we can get some of these bullpen arms throwing some really meaningful innings and outs in a really fun but also pressure environment to some degree in Hoover.
Mhm.
That's probably where LSU would lean if I had to guess. Like, they would not overextend Anderson or Ianson or really any of their big bullets. I mean, Cowan and Evans, you can certainly throw into that mix as well,
Yeah,
because I do think that you want to see if there's any other guys that you feel really good about going into their postseason. And we saw it a couple years ago. LSU did not have the strongest bullpen into 2023 for the end of the regular season. Like, there was
yeah,
a lot of genuine concern there about how far that group could get you, but you started to see signs of it, whether it was Thatcher Hurd, Riley Cooper, Nate Ackenhausen. Those guys threw some big innings for LSU in Hoover, and it started kind of in Hoover. Particularly Thatcher Hurd is the one I'm thinking of right now. I think he had some really big outs in one of those games early on in Hoover. So if they can find somebody like that, or a couple guys like that, whether it's Shores or Jaden Newt or you mentioned DJ Primo, I would throw in Jacob Myers as well. Like, I think Myers is a guy that showed you in very limited action on over the
yeah.
weekend that 99 100-mile-an-hour fastball with some movement to it is very hard to catch up to, no matter who you are as a hitter. And if it's landing for strikes, he could be a guy that LSU asks to be at big outs in the postseason as well. So I think that if LSU handles their business against South Carolina, it's just going to be more of a curiosity on my part from a pitching perspective of how LSU handles the SEC tournament and what guys they end up relying on in those games, however long they're there.
You hit on this a little bit and just talks those bullpen arms, and I said this on the radio last week. I think that you're also sitting in a situation of where you want to keep those starters on such a routine and regular rest, because look, starters are so routine oriented, to the fact of where it doesn't mess them up. And I think that's one of the benefits of having that double bye, because you're only going to potentially play at most 3 games, right? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you can keep it somewhat of a regular schedule. I think where LSU, and like you mentioned, kind of ran into trouble was a year like last year's, where you had to kind of throw your guys day one, and you couldn't. One, Jay Johnson talked about this. You couldn't worry about the next day because you literally had to win that day to keep playing. Little bit different situation. I do want to preface with saying I don't think Jay Johnson and the message is going to be preaching, "Hey, we're not going to try to win." They're going to try to win this thing, because you always want it. You always want to not. You don't want to backpedal into the postseason, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to lose 2 out of 3 at South Carolina, lose next Friday, and then limp into a regional, even if it is at home. You
Yeah.
don't want that. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of divvy up the pitching. And like what you said, if you go Cade Anderson and he's not going to throw the 120 pitches, it feels like he can throws around 75, maybe 80 pitches, and then you let a guy like Jacob Myers, okay, hey, you get 2 innings. We need you to come out here and show you can go maybe more than 1 inning to really kind of give us something. So it'll be interesting to see and kind of monitor what LSU has going forward. Glenn, obviously, they're facing a South Carolina team this weekend that is I just would say, just has not played well. They've
Out of the
well
picture.
under, yeah, out
Out
of
of
the
the
picture.
picture.
But you know who's not? Missouri Tigers. Shout out the Missouri
Don't
Tigers.
let them get hot, man.
Do not let the boys from Como get hot. Was that the most surprising thing of the weekend for you right there? Was that crazy?
Oh, for sure. I mean, A&M looked like a totally different team. Like, I mean, than they had played previously to LSU at home. I mean, like they just really just kind of shot themselves in the foot, shot their postseason hopes in the foot with that. And
Yeah.
after the Friday game, you're like, okay, how much of that is just Missouri was due? But then you got to Sunday and they were losing the series 38-11. It's like, holy smokes! Like
Well, it wasn't even close. Yeah.
it wasn't even close. None of the three games were close. It's crazy, pretty crazy.
College baseball season winding down. We've got great coverage over at Go 24/7 for you to check out. Make sure you do that. You can click that link down below. We've got a great deal. You can go VIP for only $1. And I would encourage you to take advantage of that. You can do 30% off your first year. That comes out to just $6.27 a month. Or you can do $1 for your first month, and it's $9.95 every single month after that. And why should you do that? Well, we've got great baseball coverage, but recruiting season is in full swing. OV season kind of kicked off this past weekend. Obviously, more happening there in late May into the months of June. Camp season, lots of great intel from all of us over at Go 24/7 that we want you to come check out. So make sure you check that out. Make sure you like the podcast, subscribe to the channel there as well, and we'll see how far the Tigers go on the diamond and the Alex box. It would be nice to play all your game. Like if you could just play through, I guess like they did in 23, like just play through Alex box and see and try to get in Omaha. That's a pretty good situation, and this place will get riled up there here in the middle of late May and early June as well. So it'll be a lot of fun. But hey, we appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you watching. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. He is Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon, and this has been another edition of the Go 24/7 podcast.